You're listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which provides bite-sized tips for busy parents, educators, and anyone working with kids. These real talk conversations focus on mindful living, mental health, and personal growth, helping all to learn, grow, and inspire with mindfulness in mind. I'm your host, Vanessa de Jesus Guzman, educator, licensed professional counselor, entrepreneur, and mom. I'm passionate about helping folks live life with peace of mind and ease of heart while not losing their, well, you know, here we go. Hi, and welcome to episode 132 of the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So I'm so excited because this episode is going to include a very special guest. And we had a guest on with us in October and in November. And then with the holidays, we took a break. And now we are back to guest episodes once a month. So today I have my friend, Vanessa Paula. We actually call ourselves Vanessa Squared because she's actually my partner in our project, Amiga Moms, which is a supportive network, and we provide educational events for 21st century moms so that they can have peace of mind and ease of heart for themselves first before pouring into their kids. So I'm really excited to be working alongside Vanessa Paula, or Vanessa Squared. But today she is on with us as a guest, and I'd like to tell you a little bit more about her right after she says hello real quick. So hi, Vanessa. How are you today?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on the podcast.
I am glad that you're here. So, to share with our listeners a little bit more about you, not only is your name awesome, Vanessa, but you're also like me, where you are an educator for a really long time. So, an educator of 15 years, starting your career first as a teacher of 8 years, and then a school counselor for the past 7 years. So, shout out to that as a former
Thank
teacher and school
you.
counselor myself. But Vanessa has a very interesting background where she not only has this awesome background in education with a master's in childhood and education and school counseling and mental health, but she also has a BA in marketing. So I think that's pretty phenomenal. Gives you a very interesting worldview and experience before jumping into the world of education. So before we get into the topic of today, feel free to fill in those gaps and share whatever you'd like to share with us.
Thank you so much. Sometimes it's challenging for me to hear that, like when you hear all these things and it's because to me, I'm just like, I'm just a girl in this world. Like I want to spread love. I want to spread kindness. I am just really happy to be able to do the work that I'm doing and be able to just not impact like school systems, but organizations as well.
That's amazing. And I totally get that feeling because sometimes it's a little weird, like, wait, who are they talking about? But you do so many amazing things, even outside
Thank
of the
you.
world of being, an educator, that it's something to be really proud of. And it's okay to shine once in a while. So I am
Thank
glad
you.
that you're here. And of course, you have so much more to offer. And one of those things, I invited you on to talk about the topic of love languages. Now, for our listeners, you may remember that, her shirt says love. If you're watching us on YouTube, you see that her shirt says love. So, episode 122, I believe it was back in December, I introduced
Mhm.
our listeners to the concepts of love languages as it relates to gift buying for the holidays. So, I
Yeah.
wanted to, for our listeners who perhaps missed that, they can go back and listen. And we're going to quickly review what the love languages are, and then we're going to take it a step deeper. So, you can start off with a few, and then I'll fill in the gaps from there.
Okay, so the love languages is an amazing tool for communication. So there's 5 love languages. They was like toying around with 6, but right now I know for sure that there's 5. So it's acts of service, right? When you run an errand or you give your time, in being able to do like a household chore or giving back philanthropy, but it's actually like giving back, right? Then we have quality time, where you give undivided attention to, I don't want to say partner, because I think that it's just the people around that we love, right? The people we do
Right.
life with. So it's the undivided attention, being mindful and intentional with how you spend quality time with the person. Then we have words of affirmation, which it's offering like empowering, like loving words. So like, oh, you're doing amazing. I see you, I love it when um you wash the dishes, and it makes me feel like really happy to know that you heard me, right? We have physical touch, which is the hugging and the holding and the cariño, right? And then we have gifts, which is tangible gifts.
Yeah, I love the words that you use there, especially at the beginning. So I just want to highlight them. I like how you said the people that we do life with, because it's more than just a partner, as you're saying. It could be a
Right.
parent, it could be a child, a colleague, our friends, and we do life in different pockets. So I
Yes.
love the way that you explained that. That was awesome. And the second group of words that you said were how we have to be mindful of, and we have to be aware and be intentional. And
Yes.
those are my jam words, right? And I love them because I'm really big on not just meditation, right? Not just taking out this big chunk of time and practicing mindfulness in that way, but I'm really big on mindful living, being aware of where we're spending our energy, how we are coming
Right.
across to those that we interact with, how we are showing gratitude to everything, those we come across and the things that we come across. And I think that that really integrates mindful living with these love languages, because when we are aware, when we are intentional, when we are mindful, then we can just be more present in our lives and feel
Absolutely.
more fulfillment with these love languages intertwined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a tool. It's a tool for communication, right? We are human beings just trying to, we're on a journey of life, right? And it's important that each and every one of us feel seen, feel heard, feel valued, and feel loved. And it's like when we are mindful of, again, the people we do life with, and if you're aware of what their love language is, you can communicate with them in a very different way, that it's like, okay, she sees me and I feel seen, I feel safe.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's huge. And so we gave a brief introduction on what all of them are. And the founder really created this at
Yeah.
first, just in general, for, I believe,
Mhm.
marriage counseling. But
Yes.
now there's some for like military families, for
Mhm.
children, for different occupations. And I wanted you to speak a little bit about how understanding love languages, how that impacts the relationships that we have, depending on who they are with.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So he has like actually children and then teenagers, because the teenage stages.
Different.
But it does impact, because again, it allows the relationship to either flourish, right? And in order for a relationship to flourish, you need to nourish it. And if we don't nourish it and we don't spend time to be intentional, like, okay, how am I gonna show up for this person? How am I gonna communicate that I love them on an everyday basis? And I mean, every day is not perfect, right? Because we're human beings, but I think it's important to lead with that intentionality, so that in that relationship, it's a consistent work, because it's a garden. Like relationships are like gardens, right? If you don't water it, give it what it needs, the garden is not going to grow. So
Yeah.
sometimes people take for granted, like, oh, I've known this person for so long, or this person is my daughter or husband or son. They have to love me. Yes, they're going to love you, but it's the difference where like you may not feel seen, or they may dislike you, right? Or it may feel like, okay, there's no intimacy in that relationship. And again, even though it was created for couples, and sometimes when you hear the word intimacy, you're like, oh my God, it's physical. And it's actually not. It's being able to emotionally nourish each other in whoever you're doing life with.
Yeah, yeah. To have that connection with somebody. And I like the metaphor of it being a garden, because you can grow roses and gardenias and beautiful flowers, or you can grow weeds, depending
Yes.
on how
Yes.
the attention and what you give to that relationship. And every person that we come across with, whether it be, our spouse or our partner or our kids or our family members or the post person or a
Yeah.
police officer or the, customer
Mhm.
representative at whatever company, we have relationships with everybody. So it's not only our intimate relationships, as you were saying, it's anybody. But
Mhm.
really, we have to pay attention to how we interact with those people, whether they take up 2 minutes of our lives and we never see them again, or whether they're in the big chunks of our lives.
Right. And like, I'm sure if you go to your post office, like the postal man, you're like, what's your love language? He's gonna look at you like, gay, what are you talking about? But it's important for us because I know for me as a first generation, I didn't have access. And I come from a family that was not very we didn't have strong relationships. It was just like you gave them respect based on the title that they had. But then as human beings, it was very challenging. Like, this doesn't make sense. So this is why I'm very passionate about like love, because love is a verb. The people think like it's a noun, but it's actually a verb and what we do each and every day. Now, again, we're human beings, so it's not going to look like perfect because it's about progression and not perfection.
Yeah. I love that. It's about progression and not perfection. I want that to kind of like resonate in people's ears, because that's so deep. And if we keep that in mind in our interactions, imagine the impact that that can create, not only for others, but then when we look back on our own actions, because more often than not, we're our worst critic, right? Our biggest judge. If we
Yeah.
hold that, then we can be a little bit more kind to ourselves. And
Yeah.
that is huge. That's really, really big.
Yeah. And even in that aspect, how we nourish our like self-love is paying attention to our own love language, right? And that's how we can also nourish ourselves. Because let's say, like for me personally, I'm quality time. I like to go to the movie theaters. And a lot of times people look at me like if I'm by myself and I'm like, what? Like I'm self-loving. Like this is how I communicate. So, and even in that aspect, right? Thinking about when they say like, oh, your inner child, if this is the quality, like this is the love language that you had, if you were a child that came from either chaos or dysfunction, there's years and years and years of love that you did not receive.
Right.
So a lot of times people are like, but I don't understand what's going on. I can't, I'm on this healing journey and it's hard. And it's like, let's kind of come back to like maybe refilling our cup to nourish ourselves because self-love is really important, right? If we can't pour out from an empty cup.
Yeah, you beat me to one of the questions that I had for you, which is what
I'm
is your love
sorry.
language? No, you're right on target. So it is quality time, and that's great to know about you, but it's also great to know how we can get to know ourselves better based upon who we are now, but also who we were as kids. And that
Yes,
really plays a big part into the way that we show up, the way that we take care of ourselves, offer ourselves self-care and self-compassion, and then the way that we interact with other people.
absolutely.
Yeah, my love language is acts of service. I really appreciate when, especially like within my own house, if anything is done to kind of lighten the load, because I usually feel that the load is so heavy or my plate is so full, that speaks more to
Yeah,
me than, a blank number amount that a gift costs, because
yeah.
that's really what I need in my life. So it's great to know when you know what your own love language is. I think that goes a long way with the relationships in your
Yeah.
life.
And it's empowering, right? Like, like, oh, we're an empowered woman. It's like knowledge. When my mom used to always say, knowledge is power. And I didn't really understand, but it's not just school. Like
Right.
people think like, oh, knowledge is when you go to a classroom. And it's like, no, no. Knowledge is light, is like educating ourselves in different aspects. Like if we were to think about ourselves and even in the 8 dimensions of wellness, right? Those how we know ourselves and how we have that knowledge is important.
Absolutely. And when we talk about interacting with other people, it's a really big skill of, that emotional intelligence. Like, how is
Yes.
it that we know others, that we relate to others, that we relate to
Yeah.
ourselves, and that we show up in the world? And that's whether you're in a classroom, outside of a classroom, in an office, outside of an office, or wherever you are, you need to know how to relate to yourself, to others, and how your actions impact other people and impact our world and our society as a whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to that point, just because our love language is one way doesn't necessarily mean that the other person's love language is the same.
Right.
So being mindful in understanding that, I would have my daughter do like the love language test just to make sure, because it also changes. So when she first did it at the age, I got the tools late in the game, right? I wish I would have had it much younger. So if you're a young parent, I wholeheartedly recommend to start implementing this at an earlier age. But her first like prominent was quality time.
Mm.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So I was very intentional with like planning experiences because I love to like do different things. But then when she got to about 16, 17, it became words of affirmation.
Okay.
So then when I wasn't giving her that, and it felt like, she was at that age where we were clashing,
16,
my
17.
words, yeah, my words weren't affirming because I'm like, so then it was like, well, you don't love me. And I'm like, I do love you, but it was words of affirmation. So I was like, okay, I have to figure out how to affirm because that's all it is. Love is about making people feel loved, seen, and heard, right?
Yeah.
So, being intentional with the other person's love language and that it could change, it could fluctuate. That just because they have it high in one area doesn't necessarily mean that it's not all the other ones. So,
Right.
observing, watching, being intentional.
All those things, yeah. And how do you recommend, I mean, you just said you had your daughter actually take the test. So do
Yes.
you recommend that we in our relationships, or those that we hold closest to us, that we take the test and kind of keep our own separate things or have conversation? Should we go about that?
So what I did was, because then the teacher and counselor kicked in, right? And I was like, we're gonna take I sent her an email, and she's like, Mom, I always send her like these like professional emails. I'm like, and today we're gonna do this, right? And she's like, Mom, like you couldn't go to the room and tell me? Like, I'm like, no, 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 no. So I had her take the test. Another cool thing that they have updated on the website, which is like so important, apology language.
Mm,
So conflict, right? Because yes, we love, but there is a human part where we're gonna encounter conflict.
it's inevitable.
How right, and how we do conflict for some of us, understanding fight or flight
Yep.
can miscommunicate our other words or miscommunicate our intentions. I said, okay, take your love language and take the apology test and take the anger assessment. I said, we're going to have lunch and talk about it. We'll exchange. And it gives you percentages. But again, she was 17, right? As the adults, we do understand it. Then it's the application that comes next, right?
Always.
So that's key. I highly recommend that you implement family meetings. And I know like it sounds, when I say that, some people are like, oh, that's so corny, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, but how as human beings, like things have to happen at home. And we see so much heartbreak, so much devastation happening when adults, people like they're hurting inside, they don't feel
Mhm.
loved, right? Or they're living with people and it doesn't feel like they're seen. And it's like I rather us implement healthy ways to like communicate, have family meetings. We can talk about this, and it may not resonate, and that's okay. You don't need a whiteboard.
Right.
You don't need anything fancy. Parents are teachers at home as well,
Yeah,
and I think
they're the kids'
sometimes,
first teachers.
right. And it's like, how can we implement these tools to support our children? Because they're going to be adults, right? We want to be able to raise kind human beings that are just kind and have compassion and, can support other people.
Yeah, so many golden nuggets in there. And just with that last part that you said, imagine if we had more of that in this world, how
Yeah.
much kinder, how much not softer, but compassionate and
Right.
understanding we would be as a society instead
Yeah.
of these sometimes ugly moments that we see on TV or that we experience ourselves when we have conflict. And like we said, conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's an everyday part of life, but it's the way in which you handle the conflict that really makes
Yeah.
a difference. And when we're talking with our kids in mind, we want to make sure that we empower them with the tools that they are going to need to meet success. And I don't mean success in getting an
Right.
A on a test, right? Or getting first honors in school or the dean's list. And even though it's fantastic, but what I mean is really to meet success in the everyday interactions that they're going to have with their friends, with their teachers, eventually with a partner, with a colleague, and again, even with the post office person. So everybody
Right.
that they come encounter with.
Absolutely. It's the character for me,
Yeah.
and I'm nowhere near perfect. I just want to put that out there. I am nowhere near perfect. And sometimes my nervous system kicks in and the fighter will come out and the not so nice words will come out, but I'm also learning, I'm putting a huge emphasis on the ing because that's why I said like life is about progressing and not
Yes.
perfection. And then people think like, oh, well, you're professional or you're an adult and you should know X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, you don't know what I've had to encounter or overcome. And I may not know certain skill sets. So I want parents to also give, or adults to give themselves grace for things that they didn't know. That's absolutely okay. It's about learning. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's about learning and every day and just even if it was a little bit like the communication was a little bit more, better, then that's fine because what we're seeing again, an increase of hurt people hurting other people. And oftentimes you just hear that. So I don't know where I was going with that, but
No, I love it. It's so good. And on my wall, if you're watching us on YouTube, I have learn, grow, inspire. And that's
yeah,
my life and my business motto, right? We are always learning.
yeah,
And with everything that we learn, we're constantly growing as people, whether you're 222 or 102, we're
yeah,
always, always growing. And what my personal hope is that with all this learning and growing, that then we take that and we use it to inspire others so that they can do the same. And so our generations become better with time and that we don't stay stuck. I want to
yeah.
speak to something else that you said before, those golden nuggets,
Oh,
regarding the test online that will be linked, by the way, for everybody in the show notes so that you can access that. It's a free quiz on the
yeah,
website of the Five Languages website. I also advise if you're in a relationship to have your partner and spouse
yes.
also take the quiz, but then don't just leave it in silos or in separate pockets and go on with yourselves. Really, then come together and have that conversation and then
Mhm.
ask the whys, like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know. Oh, is this why this
Yes.
situation happened that way? And then
Yep.
important questions like, what is it that you need more from me so that I can
Yes.
speak to your love language more? And just as important, this is what I need so that you can speak to my love language and develop and improve those relationships there.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. Absolutely. And that's like that could happen during family meetings. You can get creative, right? You can, let's say, like cook a meal together every Friday and like, okay, we're gonna have this set time uninterrupted, all phones off, because we're also seeing an increase in like kids on their phones. And like I went to a restaurant the other day and like an entire family were on their phone the
On the
entire time. And I
device.
wanted to, and I was like, people like because this is the truth. Like you don't know when our expiration date is, right? And we're here today, tomorrow is a whole different
Never know.
story. And it's like we have to take advantage of the and be present in the moment. Like I
Yeah,
am here with you in this time. And I often hear of sad stories like, oh, I didn't even know that that was gonna be the last time I saw my loved
right.
ones when I gave them a kiss in the cheek. So it's just being intentional and mindful of that. Now, yeah, we're gonna be on our phones because that's a whole nother story, right?
That's
But
another podcast episode.
girl. But trying to like just be intentional, like, okay, you know what? if it's 2 hours, we'll dedicate these 2 hours. We'll cook together a recipe that maybe even requires all of us to do, or hey, I'll cook and you wash the dishes. So it's also implementing healthy like teamwork. And a lot of these things can support our kids and also support ourselves in just the
Yeah.
human journey.
Absolutely. And you spoke about something before when you mentioned family meetings. To some people, it can sound like, what family meeting? I mean, you
Yeah.
don't show up there, with a paper agenda and a gavel
No.
in hand and a whiteboard, like you said, and somebody taking minutes. Like, that's not what we mean when we say family meetings. It can be something like pre-planned where you have some agenda items, so to speak, that you do want to cover, but it can be just a topic of conversation that you think
Yeah.
it's important for everybody to be on the same page, or it can be more loose, like, what do you want to do this weekend? Or,
Yeah.
anything like if you had three wishes, what would they be? Anything, whether it be concrete or outside of the box, that you're just building the connection further and really strengthening that relationship with your children. And a message, in that same breath, a message for all of the parents of young children, and educators too, but especially the parents. It's the
Yeah.
relationships that you build with them when they are little, when they're younger, that really is going to be the deciding factor of how that relationship may turn out, because not a guarantee, but how it may turn out when they're older, and just how
Yeah.
important that is. And a family meeting, or just having dinner together, or like playing games at night, that's just so important for the family bond that is going
Oh,
to really help in the future.
games again. Oh my God, games are awesome. The board games, let's bring them back, right? Let's bring back some of that old school loving where it also builds community, right? It builds in
Yes.
that relationship. And just because you live with somebody every single day does not mean that you're close.
Right.
You can
You
be
got to
really
work at
close,
it.
right? Like the garden, you have to nourish it in order for it to grow.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So we bounce around a little bit, which is totally okay, because I think that any person in a family, which is every person, can get some nuggets that they can implement within their own lives. And I also want to state that you can have your family take the quiz and have a conversation thereafter. But let's say with colleagues or with those people that you meet, where you're not going to go up to everybody and say, please take this quiz and then get it back to me, and then I can have a relationship with you. Because life doesn't quite work that way, right? But just
Oh my God. No,
the
because I've been
understanding of
I've been
it.
like, do I send them? Because I've also done professional development for teachers and how to
Mm,
implement the five love languages within their classrooms. That's how we really see our students, because when
yes.
students or just even human beings, when they feel happy or fulfilled, okay, someone loves me, someone sees me. It's it also goes to the data of suicide prevention.
Absolutely.
It goes to the data of mental health. At least they know one person loves them and they
Yeah.
feel it. Not that just they know it, but they feel it. And how many people, we're seeing these high numbers of suicide, and how many people you can be like, oh, but they didn't even look like it. Like a lot of times it's just because they didn't feel like anyone loved them.
Yeah, yeah. And that speaks to why it's so important. And schools are putting so much emphasis now on that social emotional learning and
Yeah.
really connecting with kids as people first before we can even teach them or reach them, because they need
Yeah.
to, like you said, feel seen, feel heard, and feel loved in order for anything else after that to really fall into place. So important with our kids, inside of our homes and outside of our homes. And
Yeah.
when you meet people, just having the knowledge of what these love languages are. And sometimes with strangers, we can only assume, what it is, but just treating everybody with, kindness and
Yeah.
decency and the way that we wish to be treated. And then as you get to know people, then maybe striking it up in conversation or just asking simple questions can really help guide us. Like, well, maybe they don't need time with us, but maybe they need those words of affirmation to really affirm that, they're doing things okay, or that we appreciate them, or whatever it is, that's going to make such a difference in those relationships. And we never
Yeah.
know how it's a domino effect. And if
Oh,
that made a
yeah.
difference with them, then where else it's going to impact.
So even if it's just words of affirmation, I'm always like cheering on my people,
You do. You're so good at
sending.
that.
Thank you. Because it's like at certain points, sometimes, especially in this first generation Latina journey, right? It can
Mm.
feel very overwhelming, and we don't celebrate the small wins when like thinking about where how our families even got here, and then to know like where we at versus the sacrifices that they made, and the sacrifices that we either speak of and we don't speak of, but it's hard work and it's timing. So it's important that we lift each other up, even if it's like a hey girl I see you, or even if it's a bitmoji. It literally takes like 30 seconds, or even if it's a joke. I think it's important that if you may not know the other person's love language because you're just getting to know them, words of affirmation is just, and then it doesn't have to sound like, oh my God, I am, I don't know your five love language, but I'm sending you this word of affirmation.
Right.
So like, no, mama, just like see something, support them, uplift them, because again, as human beings, we all need to be uplifted and loved on. So I always say like
Yes.
love on your people, because love is a verb. I can't emphasize it. Love is a verb.
I love that. And you are so good at it, and it's so appreciated, because
Thank
sometimes,
you.
you could just be in a funk or having some kind of day, and then just receiving, again, just even a simple Bitmoji, you don't know how much of an impact that may be making on someone else. So I
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, I got you.
So this has been amazing conversation, and I want to wrap up with just a few questions about how mindful living integrates with your life. So, what's your favorite way to take care of your mental health or engage in self-care?
Okay, so for me, I like to take warm baths. I do. I just, it's just something that like, who saw? I like to listen to like the
Mm.
rain sounds, and you can go on YouTube and be able to research it. I also like to eat. And I know it sounds crazy, but I like to taste like the different taste in the food. So that how
Okay.
sometimes people just eat like, oh my God, I gotta go. Like,
Really mindfully eat.
yeah, I like to sit down and like, oh, this got some sofrito. Like, oh, let me see what this. Oh, okay, because there was a time where food was scarce, and I didn't have the opportunity to have a variety of food. So
Mm.
like it's in these small moments where I am very grateful for the trajectory of how the trajectory of my life went, because I had to work hard to even just be able to like be able to buy seafood, right? Like that was something that we didn't have access to when I was younger. But now I'm like, okay, so when I buy a salmon and I buy shrimp, I'm like, oh yeah, girl. Like, it's the small wins in life. It's the small
Yes.
wins in life.
Yes, and that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And that really is integrating mindful living in everyday life. So beautiful, beautiful. And last but not least, if you could be remembered for one thing in this world, what would it be?
For my kindness.
And I think that is a definite, because you exude that from your words to your smile to your soul. So thank you for being you and everything you do.
Thank you.
Any closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, just give yourself grace, because it's an everyday journey. Like, don't, I know it could be hard to be on like, oh my God, I didn't know this, but you can implement small changes every single day, because life is about the choices that we make. So if you didn't make good choices today, that's absolutely okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's just tomorrow choose differently, and learn from that, because it can be really hard to like be hard on yourself and like, oh my God. But
Mhm.
just life is choices. So be mindful, like try to be mindful. What I love about what you do is like you offer your community this idea of bite size, right? Because people think like Rome was built in a day, and I got to make sure that have this, you know. And even when we were planning together for the Amiga moms, we were like, okay, what bite size tangible tool can they walk away with? And even seeing their responses, I was like, okay, like I wanted to cry because, you know, it's hard sometimes, but I cry in a way because it was beautiful to watch them feel poured into.
Yeah. And with that, I also like to remind everyone that if you'd like to see both of us, Vanessa Squared, in action, you can catch us every last Tuesday of the month. We host Amiga Mom meetups where you can come and connect, release, and recharge in community with other moms. So if you'd like more information about that, you can check out freetobemindful.com/Amiga Moms, which will also be linked in the show notes. So Vanessa, thank you so much for spending this time with me in addition to all the other time that we spend. And I know that our listeners are going to get a lot out of not only what are our love languages, but the importance of it and how you can implement them in your everyday life. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for today's guided meditation, I ask for you to just take a quiet moment after this episode to reflect on the message that you heard and think of what is one piece of information that you can take from what you heard and implement in your everyday life. Have a great week, and I'll catch you next time. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. It would mean a ton if you took this moment to review the Free to Be Mindful podcast on the platform you catch your favorite shows. That quick and easy act lets me know what you enjoy, and it helps others find the podcast too. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you can listen along next week. In the meantime, I welcome you to catch me on social media at Counselor V de Jesus. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.